I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. And all the roads we have to walk are winding, and all the lights that lead us there are blinding. And there are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how. But maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my wonderwall.
Hey everybody, I hope that your weeks are off to a good start. Welcome back to another episode of Morning Coffee with Rick Alexander. And as always, that intro music was provided by Brittany Taylor. She is Barbell Brittany on Instagram. Shoot over there and send her some love. I am really appreciative of her constantly recording new tracks for us to use. I think it really kicks this thing off to a good start, and I hope that it puts you guys in a good mood as you're on your morning commute or working out or however it is that you're enjoying your morning coffee. And I also want to say I am super appreciative of everybody's feedback so far, everybody that reaches out and says thanks for listening, everybody that hits up one of their friends that they think this message would resonate with. I'm seriously so appreciative for all of it, and I just want to say a very warm thank you. And I also want to say it seemed like yesterday's episode really hit a bit of a vein with a lot of people. I got a ton of feedback. It seemed like a lot of people kind of got their gears turning on whether, when we look back at all of our lives, whether all of these things had any kind of significance. And I'm glad, because that's seriously what I want this show to stand for and be about. And I want to be honest with you, it was not always easy to get to the point where I could produce this show. I probably had to record, over 100 Lionheart Radio episodes before I had the balls to do a solo show. Even though this is actually one of the shows that I've wanted to do for a very long time, I've always felt like, man, I think I have something to say. I think I have a perspective, and I want to put it out there. But at the same time, it can be nerve-wracking to bear your thoughts and to sort of be vulnerable for a minute, especially for me to get behind the microphone. And that's actually what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to maybe take a moment, and I wanted you to think about what it is that you are most afraid of in this world. And then I wanted you to maybe think about ways that you can start cutting that thing down to make it a little bit more manageable. Because I think that fear of the unknown, of what could happen, is actually the thing that holds everybody back in all kinds of situations. It's that fear of a future that is not yet manifested, so we cannot trust it, right? Because even if the present is bad, sometimes we think that is the only thing we can trust, because at least the bad we know is better than the chaos that we don't know. And that's why we maybe stay in a relationship that we're not super happy with, right? Why we're afraid to quit that job, because we don't know what it's like when we're unemployed. And right now, even though I hate this job, I've got a paycheck, right? And so we almost become trapped by our fears, because we think that the thing that we have now that we know is actually keeping us safe. But it might be to the detriment of the future that could be. See, because everybody that gets out of a really bad relationship knows it always gets better. And that's a thing that that's a thing that we're afraid to do. I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody, or even myself, like leave a relationship so reluctantly because we get so scared that we're never going to get anything better, because a future that's not yet manifested scares us, but it always does. In all of these things in our life, we figure it out. We start cutting it down and we figure out how to get there. And the reason that's important to understand is because that perspective hopefully is what's going to allow us to start stepping out on a limb toward the things that we're afraid of. I told you guys at the beginning of the show, I was always afraid to do this solo show. So what did I do? I literally started a show with two other co-hosts where I had other people to help me carry the conversation. That was sort of my first whack at this thing, my first slice toward it, right? And then I thought, man, we got to have guests on this thing. They're gonna help bring this thing. And so then we had a guest. So then it was three of us with one guest. And that was my second whack at this thing. And I was getting a little closer to this thing that I was really, really afraid of. And then after a while, some of the co-hosts decided that they didn't really like the frequency of it, and it was getting really hard to coordinate schedules, and they weren't into it as much as I was into it. And so then it was just me and a guest, right? And I whacked that thing off again, and I took another slice at it. And then I got to the point where it was me and a guest, and I was like, well, I got to record an intro for this thing. So I started recording an intro. And the first time I tried to record an intro, it probably took me 15 times. And it was just me talking about what's going to happen in the show. Not a big deal. And then after a certain amount of time, I was like, man, I've got something I need to say beyond what I'm able to say with the guests. I still love that show, and I love that dynamic. But I felt like the world could benefit from some of the other perspectives and ideas I had. And that was my final whack at this thing, right? And here I am recording a solo show for you all. And right now, as I say this, this is probably my 15th time trying to record this one show. And every single one has taken me about 10 tries. But it's okay, because every single time I'm taking another whack at it. I'm taking another rep. I'm getting closer to finding my authentic voice. And then eventually I get a show that I'm pretty happy with and I release. And I commit to staying here and recording this no matter how long it takes, no matter how many times it takes me, I'm going to get this show done. And that's how we take something that we're super scared of and we slowly step toward it. And that's exactly how we contend with the future that we don't yet understand. You know, when babies are learning to talk, they sort of just babble. And what's interesting is that they actually say all of the phonemes in all of the languages. And what they realize eventually, they throw all of these different phonemes up until they realize that some aren't useful anymore. And then depending on the language that they're raised in, the culture that they're raised in, they start to narrow down their language and the phonemes that they can say, and they actually lose the ability to say other phonemes. And that's why it's really hard to learn a language as an adult as opposed to when you're a kid. Well, that's one of the reasons. And that's kind of how we contend with a future that we don't understand. We just have to step into it, and we sort of start taking whacks at it. We start throwing things up into the air, and we have to figure out what sticks. And sometimes we don't get it right on the first time. And that's okay. Your job is not to get it right on the first time. Your job is to get it right eventually. But if we're going to contend with the future that we don't yet understand, we have to sort of throw all of these different phonemes until we figure out the ones that are relevant and the ones that don't matter. And then we figure out the ones that do matter. And then that's what we use to step forward with. In my book, I talked about this thing called the art of the low risk probe. And that's to take this thing that you want to do far in the future. If maybe, let's say, a marathon is a thing that you want to do, then a low risk probe would be a 5K, right? It allows you to enter the arena with the most minimal investment possible. And that's sort of like taking a whack at this thing that you're afraid of. Now, if the thing that you're afraid of is leaving an unhealthy relationship or quitting a job, well, then maybe that takes more counsel, and maybe that takes an actual leap, right? It's not this thing that you can inch toward. But what I would say is, I had all of these trepidations, and as soon as I started putting the show out, I started getting people to give me feedback on it, and they were overwhelmingly positive. And honestly, the people that don't like it, I mean, it's not a big deal, right? Because my job's not to make them love the things that I have to say. My job is to say the things that I love and hope that they land in the right place. And it's the job of the universe to make sure that those words land in the right place. And the reason I'm saying that is because this thing that you're afraid of, that you really want to do, your job is to do it. It's not to judge to the reaction. You've been given this thing for a reason. And I say that all the time, but you've been given this desire. You've been given this sort of inkling to want to do something for a very specific reason. I think that's why the show yesterday hit such a vein with people, because these things have significance. And if you're afraid of it, if you're afraid of what is not yet to come, it probably is because you actually really, really need to do that thing. And honestly, I think that you can trust the fact that it always does get better. It always does work out. And when it doesn't work out, it's actually not nearly as bad as we thought it was going to be. That fear of the unknown, that fear of what we don't yet know, is actually more scary than it working out negatively in the first place. And I think as we look to the future, the difference between the life we could have and the life we want to have, and then the life that we're afraid of, is contingent on our ability to step into what we don't know and to create order out of it. And so we have to do our best. We have to do our part. We have to, when we've been given a dream, it's our job to pursue that as good as we can. But then it's the universe's job to work that shit out, to make sure that that word lands where it's supposed to land, that that thing that you want to do ends up where it's supposed to end up. And if you just trust in the process, and you trust in the universe, and you trust in all of these things, you trust in me telling you that you should probably do that thing, it's going to be okay. You're going to figure out that it's not going to be as bad as you think it does. And for what it's worth, it always gets better. And so I would encourage you, as you look to the future, as you look to what you don't understand, and even more so as you look to what you are afraid of, you are scared of it because deep down that is the thing that you should be doing in this world. And so if you have that, I would encourage you to start taking a whack at it. Start thinking about it. Let it kind of get under the skin, let it ruminate, and let yourself start figuring out ways to move toward it, because it's going to tear you up if you don't. And you don't want too many years to go by with you avoiding that thing that you're afraid of. You know, I will leave with this. I'm afraid of heights, but I've just finished an 11-year career in the military with Special Forces. We rappel, we fast rope, we jump out of airplanes, and I'm afraid of heights. And people always ask me, because people always say, I could never jump because I'm afraid of heights. That's okay. You can be afraid of it. You just can't let it rule your life. You have no control over what you're afraid of and what you're not afraid of. The thing that you can control is what you do. And so I would encourage you to not let that fear run your life. I would encourage you to figure out what you want, and regardless of the fear, figure out some way to start taking small steps toward it. And I'll talk to you guys tomorrow on Morning Coffee.